I'm a native of Mexico. I was born in Mexico, and if there are any Mexicans here, you know that Mexicans are famous for being late. They're notorious for it. And I don't mean 15 or 20 minutes. I mean, we're like an hour late, fashionably late. And I grew up in a household, however, where I was taught that I was not to be late to anything. My mother especially pounded that into us. We were to be on time or early. Of course, my mother never knew that I was going to live in Boston when she taught me that lesson. And yeah, it was crazy coming in here. And I want to thank Judith for, she's one cool customer. I was increasingly frantic in my phone calls, and she was very calm and guided me in. And thank you, Judith, very much for doing that. I appreciate that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so honored to be here and so grateful for this recognition, especially from this group that's, I know now, is making such a difference in the lives of so many people who would otherwise not know where to go for the crucial services that the Latino Health Institute provides. Judith White was kind enough to give me a tour of the LHI facility on Berkeley Street, and I met a number of people there who are on the front lines of the battle to make life better and healthier for Latinos in Massachusetts. And with the introduction that I just received, the cat is a little bit out of the bag. You will know when I tell you now what I rarely admit, and that's that I've been doing what I've been doing for more than 30 years. Usually when people ask me how long I've been in this business, my standard reply is longer than I care to admit. Because I really don't like to admit it. It makes me old, but with the title of my talk today being, you know, long way here, long way to go, it is clear that I was going to have to fess up on how long I've been doing this. I guess that I have trouble believing it myself, that I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I think back on my start in broadcast journalism as if it were yesterday, really. It was, in fact, 1974. Maybe some of you weren't born then, but I was armed with degrees in music and languages, and I auditioned for a job to do the midnight news, as it was called at the time. It was actually the sign-off news for the NBC affiliate in Tucson, Arizona, where I had done my undergraduate studies at the university there. My goal was to work and to save money to further musical studies in Europe. Well, from the moment I got that job, everything was, it was incredible. Everything pretty much fell right into place for me, right into my lap in broadcast journalism. Literally, dozens of job offers poured in from throughout the country, and I accepted the one from the city, in the city where I thought I would most like to live, and that was San Francisco. Now, I need you to please understand that this did not happen because I was so talented in broadcast journalism. I didn't know a thing about it. But the wheels of affirmative action were very much in motion at that time, and the FCC was breathing down the industry's neck to hire minorities. Now, I, at the time, was what you would call a double minority. And, of course, I haven't heard that term in a long time either. I was a woman and an Hispanic, and that was really all that mattered to all of those stations who were offering me jobs. And they were also promising me training. So I was in fact, very, very fortunate. It, however, was not easy at all. There was no training, ever. And I did have to learn to sink or swim in San Francisco, which is a top 10 market, where the newsroom was filled with old white guys who really resented me. They had, after all, paid a lot of dues, and I had not paid a single due. Fast forward 34 years later, and I like to think that I've paid a lot of dues since then to get to where I am today. But there are, in fact, millions of Hispanics across the country who in one way or another are paying their dues. And no matter how much dues they pay, their lives don't get any better. It hasn't been until fairly recently that the media has paid much attention to the Latino story. But statistics, of course, are forcing that story be told. No doubt the numbers are greater now, but a 2000 census report says Hispanics in the country number 35.2 million people. That's 12.5% of the population. The Hispanic population has literally exploded in the United States since 1990. The census report says it's increased 61% since 1994, or 1990 rather. Now, when I worked in California in the mid to late 70s, both in San Francisco and in San Diego, there were predictions that Hispanics would be the majority population by the end of the century. Well, a report by the California Department of Finance indicates that that's not the case yet, but it also indicates that that trend is definitely headed in that direction. Hispanics now make up 1/3 of California's population, and the prediction is that by 2042, Hispanics are going to be the majority population in California. Now, the Pew Hispanic Center says that Massachusetts has the 15th largest Hispanic population in the country. There are more than 500,000 Hispanics in the Commonwealth, and they are largely centered in cities like Lawrence and Chelsea and Holyoke, and they have the sad distinction of being among the poorest in the Commonwealth. Now, a state government study from 2002 says that the number of Hispanics here grew 62% from 1990 and 2002. And that is, of course, a number that squares with that 2000 National Census report that said the number of Hispanics in the country began to skyrocket in 1990. What are their stories? Well, my experience tells me that their stories, more often than not, are about poverty and suffering and struggle. In the past year, I have seen that Hispanics are very much the victims of the foreclosure crisis. I've covered quite a few of them in the Lawrence area, where Latinos so eager to attain the American dream now find themselves stuck in an American nightmare. For many of them, language was an issue when they signed documents that would trap them in loans that they could not afford. Over and over again, I heard the victim's story, and it goes something like this. A relative told me that they had a friend who had a friend, sound familiar? Who's in the mortgage business, and they can help you. What better recommendation could there possibly be? And don't worry, anxious buyers were told they speak English and Spanish, so they can translate everything for you. Sadly, the people who first began to lead these victims, because that's what they are, into the trap, perhaps unwittingly, were relatives and friends, people who they trusted. In 2002, the Hispanic population in Lawrence was 60%. Now, many of them are clients of Lazarus House. I don't know if you're familiar with Lazarus House, but that's the largest shelter in the Merrimack Valley, and it doesn't take any government funding. For more than a decade, I've helped to raise money for Lazarus House, and my friends there tell me that every year the need gets greater for food, for housing, for decent health care. I was last there around the holidays, and when Lazarus House is involved in huge food giveaways for Thanksgiving and Christmas. The lines were long, and they were overwhelmingly Latino. And it seems like every time Lazarus House takes a couple of steps forward, something happens to push it 3 steps backwards. Storms and flooding have been big problems for Lazarus House to overcome. I've seen the staff there go without pay to provide for their clients, and I've seen the goodness from a caring public as well. Every time I do a story on the latest crisis facing Lazarus House, people and companies step forward and they give large.